What's up? Welcome to episode 5 of the LSQ podcast. I'm Jenny LSQ, a music journalist and radio host who started this podcast last year to have a place where I could indulge in longer, more in-depth, and yet somehow more relaxed conversations with my favorite musicians, songwriters, and producers. Every episode of LSQ includes some audio from my extensive interview archive, and in this episode, it's a bit of a phone interview from 2008 with Paramore's Hayley Williams, just as that band was really exploding in popularity. But the section of that interview I'll play for you actually relates to the two new interviews in this episode, in that all of these artists were brought up in musical households, and it's interesting to me the effect that has on those who end up being professional musicians as adults. In any case, the main event is going to be these two new interviews, one with a musical jack-of-all-trades named Jonathan Wilson, who has an awesome album titled Rare Birds coming out this week. You'll also hear a conversation I recorded in New York late last year with Maine, the singer-songwriter at the center of a band called Porches, whose music I fell in love with back in 2014, and I've been along for the ride ever since. You'll get to know him a bit better in the second half of this episode. But first, it's going to be the interview with Wilson. I met up with him at his Los Angeles studio, 5 Star Studios in Echo Park, where as a producer he's recorded with artists including Father John Misty, Conor Oberst, and Dawes. Wilson's own music is an increasingly refined combination of Americana, psychedelic rock, folk, and his own unique vibe. So let's get into it. Jonathan Wilson on LSQ. Thank you so much for doing this LSQ podcast thing.
I'm happy to be here.
Jonathan Wilson, old pal o' mine.
Yep.
You know, you're a dude who has done so much stuff and been involved with so much music in the 10 years or so that we've known each other.
Yes.
But, you know, a guy whose name might not immediately be recognizable to people, so I wanted to not just talk about this new album you have coming in March,
right,
which, you know, I think is your best one so far.
Yeah, thank you. I do too.
But also just kind of, you know, how you got here, because obviously we first met when you were playing with Jenny Lewis around 2008 or so.
Right.
But how long have you actually lived in Los Angeles?
Well, that time, or you know, that was the time I had like come back to stay, so to speak, which was 2005. So I mean, I've for the most part been here a full time since 2005. But previous to that, I did some stints here, you know, where I would come and go, and I started a band here, or tried to start a band here with Benji Hughes way back in 1995 or something like that.
When you arrived here in LA, you say, I want to talk some more about Muscadine and your days in North Carolina before that, but this combination of things you're doing now, producing and mixing and recording and playing and building guitars and pedals and playing on people's records and all that sort of stuff. I mean, is this the array of things you sort of imagined you wanted to do when you decided to come here?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing I was doing even way back, like when I was at home in my, in the garage. I was taking apart speaker cabinets and trying to put this drum with this other drum, and taking the strainer from one snare drum and putting it on the next, and doing the common, just sort of the common, I guess, type of person that opens up things they buy, whether it's like an amplifier or a pedal,
taking things apart, seeing how they work,
exploring. So yeah, I mean, and sort of the communal aspect, is. I guess it definitely comes from my father, who was in a band and would jam with those guys all the time, like when I was a kid, and like it's always been a like a fast track for me into a social, existence and stuff too. So
tell me more about this. I know your dad had a band, but what's the deal there? Was that from the time you were like good, you mean for when you were born he was already playing music and he didn't stop?
Exactly. I mean, and it was just a band for fun. They did gigs and like in dances and parties and blah blah blah, but that was where I definitely cut my teeth, and with that band, I would if the bass player couldn't show up, like suddenly I'd be the bass player on a gig or like rehearsal or practice, blah, blah, blah. So then...
From the age of what?
Maybe 7, 8, or 9 or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. Like
so you would at 7, 8, or 9 years old learn a song to fill in for someone, and then go play a show with your dad's band.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of places?
These would be parties, or maybe like a moose lodge.
Okay.
Like an elk's lodge, things like that. This was in a very small town, and so yeah.
What's let's give the town its due. What's this town called?
The town is called Thomasville, North Carolina.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then by the age of 13, I started like my own band, back in that town.
Right.
And I had a few bands, and like we tried to write songs, and we did the cover songs of the day and all that kind of stuff.
Which were
lots of Guns N' Roses, like some Ozzy, some Crazy Train was in there.
And you knew how to play pretty much everything already by this point. From
I was getting there.
Self-taught.
I was getting there, and I think when I started playing the guitar, I got my first good guitar when I was 13, which was a Squier Stratocaster. And I think like my dad or his friends or some of the dudes in his band were kind of like, he's pretty good. Like he can actually play. So that was, I think, was kind of the vibe. That was so. There was definitely lots and lots of encouragement, and that continued until that continued, and then I would say from 16 like to 19, which is like when I came here for the first time. That was like my jazz phase. So what I did then was I went to school for jazz drums. I played in like a few fairly successful regional jazz like combos. So then I was trying to sort of will myself into being like a jazz prodigy, which I was pretty good, but like I was never like good enough like for that to like to be my path,
right.
Only drums. But anyway, so that was my like jazz was my punk, and that was my way like to rebel against the stuff of the day, and I mean this is a time when maybe one of the biggest bands would be Pearl Jam or something like that. So while stuff like that was going on, like in Hootie and the Blowfish, like me, I was super buried in a jazz odyssey.
So you had studied jazz in school, and you had been here and gotten a little tickle for LA, and
right.
So did you just sort of make your way here as quickly as you could?
Yeah, like I came out here with some guys like to start a band from Charlotte. Like at this point, I had moved to Charlotte, and I was sort of like familiar with Benji Hughes, who's during that time, in like the hometown was known as this, very, very special
weirdo
writer. Yeah. So so that to me was that seemed cool. So like in that particular group, which didn't even like get off the ground, that particular group of guys, like I was supposed to be the drummer and stuff. So we came out to Beverly Hills, which was was a huge culture shock for me at the time. But then we kind of tried to get this band off the ground, blah blah blah, and like that was in 1995, and so that's when I sort of was completely seduced by Los Angeles.
Right, as like if this is where you got to go to do it.
Yeah, exactly,
yeah.
Exactly.
And so you started Muscadine with Benji and some other dudes from back home, kind of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So and like we started that, and we made an album in, I guess, about that time, about 96, 95, and it came out in 97 and stuff. But that was sort of the tail end of the big like 90s grunge rock. And we signed with the legendary guy Seymour Stein, which
right.
was
And how would you describe Muscadine's music?
Muscadine was a band that was playing songs, like song-based band, kind of in a grungy package, But there was some fuzz involved, so it was more like akin to like the Chapel Hill bands of the day, who we were friends with some of those bands. It more had like a Fu Manchu sort of like
right.
big giant big muffs and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a fuzzy grunge thing. But because like me, I just did a Spotify playlist with things that I've done, and I put a Muscadine song, on the playlist. And when I went back and listened to it, it was kind of like the same thing that I do these days, it was me on the drums, the guitars, and the bass. And there were like some found sounds and weird little like cassette bits and bobs that I've always done. So yeah, I mean it was basically the same.
And
formula.
was it a positive experience, the music that you made with Muscadine and the experience of being on Elektra?
Not that wasn't. That was our first time, kind of when we got to feel what it kind of feels like to be collected, and sort of put on the ground. Like I should have known. When we signed with Mr. Stein, and I looked down on the floor in his office, and he had some Picasso sketches that were on the floor. That's when I should have known at that moment. Like, that's exactly what the fuck he's about to do, like to me.
That's what you mean by collected, then, yeah.
He's about to sign me on the line. These cool like weird fucking energetic dudes from the South. And then something may happen, it may not, but he's got you locked. So yeah, that was that experience. Something, and I mean, and it kind of put me off of being in a band and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, which was fine. But the one thing that I'm really glad we didn't have was a hit. Like I would not be stoked to be that's the guy from the Third Eye, whatever, like you know what I mean. Somebody sees me in the store and goes
closing time,
or goes like wah, or something, and I'm just like I do not want to be that guy. So I'm really glad that didn't happen. So both genuinely banger tunes. Closing Time and the wah song, but as a matter of fact, the Closing Time band was fans of ours, and they took us on some gigs, like to open.
Oh, so you heard that song a lot
back in the day, yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting time. Yeah. I mean, what would you say you most learned that is still sort of relevant to how you make decisions nowadays from that and other early experiences?
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's just to grow like a fan base. That's sort of something that's the only infallible thing that we have. Is would be like a true fan base. Like the vibe of like with those days, and like in our band getting signed and getting like a huge budget and a big advance to do this and tour support and just basically going further and further in the red, which was just like those were the days where there were like these there were lots and lots of illusions that suddenly something could catapult you like to being this thing, which I mean like that did happen, and bands like Candlebox or something had like a huge song or something that like suddenly, but those bands couldn't really.
It's not a career band necessarily.
It was kind of a shorter span of time that could exist.
So then, round about the beginning of the aughts, what were you getting up to there?
That was when I moved to Georgia and started a studio post Muscadine, and I was basically just getting into like experimenting with my own stuff, and did some albums that are like completely on the shelf that will never be heard. It was my experiments with like the Harry Smith anthology and trying to like become Bob Dylan or something. It was that type of vibe.
Sounds like kind of like
song.
You were doing some homework.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was learning how to play the banjo, and I was trying to fuse together my North Carolina bluegrass sort of bloodstream with something, and trying to find, shades of like Americana or something, like we're in the air and stuff. And I mean, as I go back and listen to those tracks now, I'm just kind of like, some of it was good, but then, and it was also mixed with rockin' stuff too. But yeah, I mean, that was basically like a time to like experiment with the studio, and so that's what I did.
Right, yeah. And was that when you began in earnest to learn how to record yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I had done that with Muscadine and stuff, like that was the first time I got into a big studio and like was able to like experiment. So I mean I built a studio and like continued that, and those have kind of been like the studios that I've had, that I still have, but like they've always been the same thing, which is mainly just a vehicle like for my own shit. You know what I mean? And the bands and the projects I do in between are just my experiments, like with sounds and guitar sounds, drum techniques, things that I'm going to use and perfect on my own shit.
When did you start because when we first met, I think, your main bag for like paying the bills was the guitar thing, right?
I started that in New York, and mainly it was pretty basic. It was like the Fender company started to make these guitars that looked like they were old, right? And I saw one in a store, and I was like, and that concept was like, wow, like, like to buy this thing that sort of looks like it's old, where somebody's taken keys and screwdrivers and they'll like stain the back of the neck to look like it's dirty, blah 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 blah. And I thought the concept was cool, but the way that it was done was kind of shitty. So I said to and during that time, I was borrowing this beautiful 1957 Telecaster, like that I gave back to the guy I was borrowing it from, and I was so attached to that fucking thing. And I was like, I bet you I can make something like this. I can make something that feels like this. That's what I did, and I made like the guitar that I still have, on stage. That was the first one that I made.
I'm going to ask what might be a stupid question, but when you say you made it, I mean so you carved the body of the. Yeah,
like when I started that, like me, I was completely insane about getting the tools to make the bodies and and that whole thing. Then I sort of figured out, as it became like a business, quote unquote, that it was better to get somebody else to do that. And
so find someone who's great. And
basically I would start with the body, get a neck, and basically do all the other stuff, all the painting and like the aging. And so that became sort of,
and just rolling things in the dirt, rolling screws in the dirt.
Like I would meditate on things to do to make things look old, and I would use ashes and balsamic vinegar and weird PCB etchant and acid and
just compare like a guitar with real wear to like what it should look like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that was something that I started doing, and I got on it right at the beginning of that whole thing. And I did little weird shit where my guitars would come with all these little weird drawings and weird shit I would find at like at junk stores and old salvage spots, and I put sort of like a homespun thing, into it, and I had dust, so when they opened the case, like the guitar was dirty and dusty and looked all fucked up and stuff. So it was basically, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I kind of like sort of garnered some fame, in the deep in the guitar nerd sort of like community. Like there's this guy who makes these weird. And the one thing
they even smell bad.
No, there was actually a guy on a forum somewhere down the line that said basically these like this lore like started like that I used like my own pee and stuff like to age the bridge or something like that, shit like that.
And this is over the course of how many years?
I made those guitars for several years,
right?
Yeah,
and then so you sort of transitioned, having started that in New York to when you came back here. Yeah, exactly.
And there was it got pretty big. It got to where I had 25 guitars to make, at a certain point, which is a lot of fucking, guitars to make. But once again, same thing. I was doing like the bread I would make from those, because they would sell for $5,000, some $6,000.
Yeah.
Some of them would actually go up in value, which is completely fucking unheard of. You know what I mean? In that type of thing.
Right.
Anyway, with the proceeds, I would buy a microphone or a guitar amp.
And were you in the spot in Laurel Canyon where you were when I met you?
Yep.
Right. So how did you get, just to refresh, because I forget, also just for the record here, in addition to the fact that Jonathan was playing with Jenny Lewis in her band when we first met, I also had an assignment for Rolling Stone, and I knew some of those folks a little bit already, but we sort of all became friends as a result of this assignment I had for Rolling Stone in 2008, during which time Wilson was having these jam sessions that by that point had already been going on for a while and grown to a point where it was like starting to become legendary, and Rolling Stone was like, "Go do this thing." Would you say that was sort of the most formative era, or sort of the most important growth period for you?
Yeah. I mean, mainly being in that, what was grown from that was not only these legendary jams, which just that sounds kind of, like if somebody told me that there was a jam, that some folks were jamming, I would kind of be like, ugh, that's probably not very good. How can that be good? And, but, I do feel like that the triumph there was that we managed to make it good, which was not fucking easy to do. So that was, I think that the most, definitely my most formative in that's when I did the album Gentle Spirit, which sort of continued to, to be sort of my, like the beginning of my, solo career.
But also the fact that whole experience of those events was that you produced them.
Yes.
You produced that event.
Right.
And the music that was made that sounded dope, the way it sounded in that room, because
Exactly.
the way you set it up, that was a production.
Yeah.
So then when you had to get out of there, and then this space became available, which is amazing, where we are now, which is the studio.
Yeah.
What's the name?
5 Star Studios.
Right,
Yeah.
where albums have been recorded with Dawes and Father John Misty, and songs with Erykah Badu, and Roger Waters recorded here, and that's part of your whole situation with him.
Yeah.
So obviously, major, you couldn't have done any of this at that Laurel Canyon spot.
Exactly.
And I remember, several years ago now, probably sitting in there with you and talking about an opportunity that had come up to go play guitar on some big tour that was like a lot of money, but it felt like a lot of pressure to decide quickly and give up the sweet situation here where you were doing stuff you were excited about.
Right.
And I wonder if at any point in these more recent years when there have been so many great opportunities, have you ever sort of decided I got to do all of it, or did you have to at a certain point say, you know what, I'm going to let go of preconceptions about what I'm supposed to be doing with my project at this point, and I'm doing it. This is it. I'm doing all of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. I mean, that's definitely what I'm about to do. I have the 2018's the most insane calendar that I've ever even fucking heard of from people that I know that tour. I mean, from anyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, I've decided to sign on for it. This is the time to do it. But it's basically like, it's just kind of what I do. Is that I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But the only thing that I have to watch is not watering, like the plants of like my own songs, which. I kind of have to constantly gauge that, like, should I spend my time making someone else's songs when I should, when my own songs might have a broader reach, like around the globe, those types of things. And then there's times when it's my deepest bros that I've just, I've like the job completely fucking has to be done, like a Josh album or something like that.
Right.
And,
let's talk a little bit about the Roger Waters thing for a minute, because that's obviously become kind of taken over your world in recent years.
Yeah.
It began as a conversation about him recording with you here.
Yeah, well, it began as him coming to town to cut some tracks with Nigel Godrich, my good pal. And they started very, very small, like in Basic, like across town at Ocean Way, and like it was Roger and bass and drums on the first day, and on day 2 they decided we need somebody, on guitar. But I got the call, I'd like to come down, and so that's what kind of started it, and the song that we did on that day is on the album and stuff, and and all the stuff I played was is there still, which was cool. But so that was the beginning of what turned into the album, which is phenomenal,
and which was recorded mostly here, right? Because I'm guessing that you started making the songs for your next record,
Rare Birds,
right? That some of those songs predate the Roger Waters stuff.
For sure.
Some of them don't, right? Some of them started after you were...
Yeah. So, like, both of those projects, like my album and the Roger thing, were, like, existing at kind of the same time, where Roger was here for some bits of time, I was in the studio, like, with this album. So,
Do you think that there were
There's definitely. I mean, there's times that those guys would go home for the night, like, and I would pull up a song from my own album with the microphones up, the same guitar amps and the same pedals. It's just the same shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's a song like the opening song.
Yeah.
That kind of has a Floydian vibe, and I'm like, that's it's kind of like the word carte blanche sort of comes to mind. Yeah, right. But yeah, like that's been like an extraordinary thing to be able to do, and that's going to like continue into, I think we're doing 7 weeks in South America or something, which is going to be probably the most exciting for like from the whole tour, because those are the big outdoor stadiums with these wild fans who just love the Pink Floyd much.
Oh yes.
And so yeah, and the fact that I get to stretch out on the songs from the album, and that I don't have to play it exactly the same every night, and things like that for me is a big deal.
Right. Do you have any new favorite Floyd songs that just from playing them? Or
I definitely have a newfound appreciation for just like the chillness of a song like Breathe. It's such a fun song to play. Like, I mean, that's the first song that we play in the show, and like we go out there and it's sort of like vibrationally unexpected, I guess. There's so much excitement, like for the show to start, and suddenly we start with this like really chill, like, so yeah, just like it is a transcendent band, and so yeah, it's an
intense show as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And so, I mean, with respect to Rare Birds, when are you going to start playing shows here in the U.S.?
Well, the tour starts like the day the album is out in stores and online to purchase. March 2nd, we start in Chicago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and we go across to Boston. I think there's 13 shows or something, and then like it ends in the States, and we fly to Scotland, and we do UK all the way to Scandi, and then like me, I'll fly back down to Barcelona and meet up with Roger and co.
And that'll be most of the rest of your year this year, 2018,
yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, the thing I'm most excited about, I have to say, because like my new band did some shows here in Los Angeles, like performing the new stuff, and that's what I'm excited a little bit to go do. So like I'll be able to do that in some pockets in the March, like July and September, So
sweet. Well, thanks for doing this, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, Rare Birds is the name of the excellent new Jonathan Wilson album, out on March 2nd on Bella Union Records. And you might want to bookmark songsofjonathanwilson.com to stay in the loop on his upcoming tour plans. And much like Jonathan Wilson, who, kind of pursued musical proficiency early on so that he could fill in his dad's band as needed, Aaron Maine of New York band Porches also had a musical upbringing. His father was a struggling singer-songwriter who did it for the love, not for commercial rewards, and you'll hear Aaron talk about the impact that had on him in the conversation we're about to get underway. For me, it was love at first listen when I heard Porches' debut full-length Slow Dance in the Cosmos, and it reminded me of some of my favorite things by like Sebadoh and Pedro the Lion. But on the past couple of albums, Aaron has expanded Porches' sonic palette to include beats and synthesizers, and some really interesting music has resulted on the album Pool that came out last year, and this year's new one, The House. Before this particular project, were you writing songs and recording your music?
Yeah, I released my first album when I was like 17 or 18 under Aaron Maine and the Riley Brothers, and my friend Will Table recorded it at his parents' house, and I guess I finished it at the end of my senior year in high school, and I remember like burning like a ton of CDs and like Xeroxing the sleeves and like sliding it into the jewel case and like passing it out to my new friends, playing like open mics and stuff. But yeah, I put out that one, Sad album, Secret album, Porcupine. I put out 4 full-length albums before Porches.
Just under your own name?
Under a few different names.
Right. And those were things that you just shared on Bandcamp?
Yeah, same thing.
Same
Just
thing.
email it to the friends, post about it on Facebook. I just had no idea like how to play the game. I didn't have a computer for like 5 years, and I think that was a huge part in just being like way out of what goes on, I guess, in a way.
Right. And you, I mean, at that point, did you even conceive of being a professional musician or singer-songwriter as like the thing you were trying to do in adulthood?
Yeah, I think, I always wanted that to happen. I don't know how realistic I was thinking about it at that point, but I did start to notice like a response to my music in college that felt really good, and that people were kind of excited about it in a way that I hadn't experienced before, that kind of gave me confidence in doing that. And I went on my first tour, I think when I was like 19 or 20. And once I did that, I was like, I have to like figure out how to make this happen somehow. And that's when I got back from that is when I started working on the Porches stuff. And
Do you think there was something that happened with your songwriting in college when you were, playing these shows that you're describing as feeling like it was connecting in a way that you felt good about? Like, what do you think changed? Did you have a sense about the group of songs you were writing then that seemed like something different?
No, I just think that it was like really good. It just encouraged me to keep doing it. That feeling felt so good, to have what I was making like affect people. So just over time, I just started to take it more seriously, or just work on it more. And
would we recognize you in them?
Yeah, you would. I think I have a pretty specific sense of melody, or like thing that comes out when I write songs that is, you can see across the board, at least in my opinion. The way I sing, what I sing about, and the words I use has changed drastically, I think, just with time and growing up and thinking about other things. But yeah, it's pretty trippy to listen back to like 17-year-old me, like learning how to sing, like had never really sung before, just figuring out my voice. And it's totally raw and wild, like, I don't know, first experience songwriting.
Right, but you're saying you still recognize some melodic tendencies that you have now as having been kind of innate back then. Because I always think that that's all artists seem to have at least one, but like, sometimes a few just innate melodies that you can hear pop up again and again in their music. And it's like, why would you fight it at a certain point? It's unique enough, whatever it is,
Yeah, I think even, like if I find myself singing something that sounds familiar, like a pattern that I have gone back to a lot in the past, even if I try and get away from it, which I think is a good thing sometimes, to challenge yourself and not kind of fall back on what feels good or, has worked for you. Whatever that essence of how your creativity, I guess, however, whatever comes out is somehow coming from the same place. If it's like, I don't know how to say it. It's like it's like the stuff that you like you're not actively making decisions about as it's like improvising or something, where it comes from your subconscious or something like that. And then a lot of it is, the gears grinding and tweaking it until it works. But I think that the essence of it, is kind of very specific to
yeah,
each
absolutely.
person.
I mean, you just think about like what's in your brain that's impossible to articulate, and then you try and make music.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think it's that, and like a lot of the music you listen to when you're like the most impressionable or kind of really like become a music fan for the first time, I'll find myself still writing melodies that will sound like the Strokes or something. Like that's definitely like the way that stuff stuck in my head. I see how that comes out. Whatever I was listening to when I was like 14 and 15 still is ingrained in a way that it kind of makes its way into my melodies.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Pleasantville, which is part of Westchester, which is like 40 minutes north on the train.
When did you start learning an instrument? Was it a thing kind of the parents suggested playing music initially, or did you find it on your own?
Yeah, well, I picked up the trumpet when I was in 4th grade, I think, and played in the school band until I graduated high school. But so that was my introduction to playing an instrument, and I just really enjoyed that from the beginning. Were
you assigned the trumpet, or did you choose it?
I was trying to think of this last night. I'm not really sure why I chose the trumpet. I guess it's kind of... It feels right. It's like boisterous and like loud and brassy, kind of like me, or attention hogging or something.
You do not seem at all boisterous to me in my
admittedly
limited interactions with you. But trumpet is a difficult, I mean, sure seems difficult to me, never having laid a lip on a trumpet, but did you find it difficult to master as like a 4th grader?
Yeah, I think everyone was kind of, it's crazy to like put an instrument into those kids' hands, but there was not, I had some really good teachers, and I think I was a lot more inclined than, a lot of kids were just in it because their parents thought it would be a well-rounded thing or something, but I, for whatever reason, was, would like practice and be excited about working on these songs and stuff. And yeah, so I did that, and then I think I wanted a bass when I was like 12 or 13 maybe. That was like my first rock instrument.
And then, but by that point, I mean, is this at the same time as you were starting to get into, this kind of defining music like the Strokes and stuff? Was that?
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to think of who I was listening to when I was into like ska music in a big way when I got my bass, and I think I was learning like, I was really into Sublime for like a year, hardcore. The only thing I listened to was Sublime, which is kind of embarrassing in hindsight, but I learned a lot of those bass lines, covered a lot of those songs. Then I think I got into Radiohead. I was really into those bass lines, and that guy Nikolai was like my hero, the bass player in the Strokes. Yeah, so I played bass for a while in a few bands, and then I just slowly started picking up the guitar, like around my friends, and they would show me like bar chords and stuff like that.
So when did you start singing?
When I was 15 or 16, I got a MacBook with GarageBand, and I had my dad's old acoustic guitar and was just messing around in GarageBand. And I remember the first thing I recorded was I was reading like the instruction manual because I didn't know where to start like writing lyrics. And so I just got really into that, I guess.
So you sang some instructions?
Yeah, over some chords, and had a lot of fun messing around with that stuff. And yeah, I would like learn covers. And then, I don't know, I had these friends that were making music and writing their own songs. And my dad is a musician and has been writing songs forever, or for as long as I can remember. So I was lucky to be surrounded by that and kind of have it feel like something that, you know, people that I knew could do. So it wasn't such like I feel like for some people still they're like, where do you start? Like they can't fathom where to even begin when it comes to writing a song, whereas for me it just seemed like something I maybe could do, you know, if I tried.
And so your dad played music as a hobby, or did he actually professionally played shows, or?
He would perform and like make these albums. He still performs and is recording. He's never had so much like commercial success with it, but to me it's amazing that he still is doing it. It's purely for he just can't not. I don't think he could stop writing songs if he tried. Yeah, but I remember like listening to his record and like jumping around the bed, singing along.
And what's it sound like? What kind of music is it?
It's like singer-songwriter, folk.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that is how I would describe it.
So when he was writing and recording his songs, was that something he did in the house? Did he have like a room he'd go to play music?
Yeah, well, he had his keyboard in his bedroom, and there was a drum set up for a while, which was amazing to be able to wail on that when I was a kid. Yeah, at my mom's place, she had an upright piano in every spot we lived in, and my brother was a classically trained pianist from when he was like 5 or 6 or something too. My mom plays piano, so I was always surrounded by it.
It's cool because it sounds like, in addition to the idea that you could write a song as an accessible idea, it's also the idea that you would do it without expecting huge commercial rewards, with something that was just in the air. Like, yes, you just do this because you like it, and you don't worry about what happens beyond that.
That's true. That is how it definitely started, and I think that's why, or I just feel lucky that I kind of was able to work on stuff in that way, just kind of untainted. Like, I just wanted to make it and share it with whoever would listen, you know, and then it wasn't for years until I thought maybe there was a possibility of making it like a career, or like having that be my job where I just do my favorite thing.
You know, you talked earlier about having this moment after that first tour you went on where you came back and were kind of like, okay, I can do a more serious version of this. I mean, has this era, you know, with Pool and with this new album, The House, like, yeah, did you have a moment where you sort of zoomed out and thought like, okay, now this is another time to, you know, think about what I want to do with this, or?
Yeah, well, I think...
Or what are the things that now feel like are possible as you know, kind of creative goals or achievements that you would not have lingered on before?
Well, when we signed the deal with Domino, that felt really real, and like from then on it was my job, and they gave me a nice advance, and it was the first time that I didn't have to have like a shit job on the side to support myself, so I had just like an obscene amount of time, and I felt super, super blessed to do that. So the only change I made was like just buckle down and like take full advantage of that time, because it felt like, you know, who has this opportunity? Like, it's all I've been wanting to do anyway, so it just felt good to acknowledge how crazy it was and just every day work as hard as possible to try and make the best stuff I'm capable of making. And I guess that's how it's always been. It's just exciting to try and outdo myself, and the more time I'm allowed to do that, like, the more I'll outdo myself, I guess. So that's the only change. I mean,
so you basically get up and you go in here
in my little room, yeah,
and just start working every day on songs.
Yeah, every day that's possible, I do that, and that's how I was doing it at my old place.
And what's a good day?
Good day, well, I don't know. It depends. I guess if I get like an idea that I'm excited about, or make a nice recording, that's all it takes, is to like feel like pure bliss and like everything is going to be okay. Even if it's like a voice memo at the very end of the day after having like a shit anything, if there's like a tiny snippet or like one lyric that I'm excited about, that feels good, like creatively, and that kind of is what goes on in that part of my life is a big part of deciding whether I'm happy or not.
Right.
Which is weird. It's a lot of pressure to like have it rely on such a fickle thing that you can't really force all the time, but yeah, it's really great. And like I obviously like to be home and like have social interactions and live like a life and have relationships, and because that feels important to having something to write about or to connect with people about. Yeah, it's really simple. I have like a really simple idea of how I'd like to.
Does the songs that you feel the best, just, you know, instinctively feel the best about, is it similar to how you feel about music you like by other artists? I mean, you know what I mean? Like the bliss of loving someone else's song and the bliss of having had a good day working on a bit of your own song. Is it a similar kind of high?
I don't know. I guess there's like some parallels because you are listening to like a piece of music in headphones and like that affects you, but it's a bit more, there's more to it, I guess, because it's what you are making and you're thinking about it that way and how other people will hear it and in the whole context of what I've been doing. But
that's an abstract question.
No, but it's good because I don't think I always listened to my music the same way as I would someone else's, and I think when I started to try and do that and like ask myself, would I be enjoying this or listening to it if it wasn't something that I had made, I made like a big shift. I think that's why I kind of started making music with keyboards and stuff. I realized that, you know, there's something exciting about hearing a song that you've made, but at a certain point I was like, I don't think I would put this on if someone else had put it out, and I wanted to consciously try and ask myself if I would listen to this, you know, if I heard someone else making it.
Is it the keys or is it the beats?
Yeah, I guess it's all of it.
Yeah.
The whole keys, beats, lyrics.
What you've mentioned the Strokes as having been a, you know, early favorite. What's some of the kind of more rhythmic music that you feel like inspires your, you know, some of your core ideas as far as beats?
I think when my friend introduced me to Blood Orange, that was like a massive thing for me, rhythm-wise, beat-wise. I just thought it was like impossibly cool, and I loved that he, you know, is from London and like has this massive love and appreciation for New York, and I kind of found myself relating to it in that way, where I just was so taken aback by everything. So there was that. Kindness, who's kind of in the same camp, and Kalela I was trying to listen to like more contemporary stuff, or stuff that people were making and putting out then, because that felt, I don't know, it's like if I should at least kind of be aware of how this stuff lives in the world and how these people are presenting themselves. But then there's, you know, like Arthur Russell and Depeche Mode and, Human League and...
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Arthur Russell. Obviously, you've covered a song or two of his, but I wonder if he's an important influence for you. I mean, I feel like the music that you've made, in terms of like exploring genres, he seems like a kind of an obvious example of someone who was adventurous and just made an abundance of music without regard for commerce.
I feel...
Who introduced you to Arthur Russell's music?
It's funny, a friend of mine in high school introduced me to it, and it was the Love Is Overtaking Me album, and I think the first like 4 songs are like full-on folk songs, and that's what I was listening to at the time, and I was like, this is so beautiful. And then my friend was like, yeah, he makes all this crazy like disco music too, and I was like, I don't know, like the like straightforward folk stuff, and then came back to it like years later and saw the album cover and was like, holy shit, like this is that record. And that's one of my favorite. I know it's like a compilation, but it's so special to like see someone's, it's like anti-scene, or like it's just, to me it's like cool to see someone's just obsession with music as a whole. It's made me feel really comfortable in exploring genres, which I feel like is not always, I don't know, like I think a lot of people are drawn to like the Bruce Springsteen or like the Ramones, like the like full-on package of like, this is like my shit, like this is the sounds that I like, and these are the clothes that I wear, and I felt like I needed to kind of stick to one idea for a while, and the Arthur Russell thing sort of helped me realize that you can do whatever the fuck you want. And I think because I'm inclined to do that, it would be stupid to go against that inclination. And I feel like Alex G is a really good example of just like within one album, it basically sounds like a compilation, and like the new Frank Ocean stuff. It's just, I love it when it's so all over the place, and if that's how you feel, like I think that's what people want to hear when they listen to someone, is like what they're thinking about or what their vibe is, and when it's all over the place, I don't know, I find that cool.
Yeah, well, it's also just, it demonstrates that person is still getting excited about new things, as opposed to just losing touch with the feeling of loving other people's music, or loving other music, and just like up the ass of their own music a little bit too much, where it's just like, well, you make that thing, but don't you want to try out other things, you know? I think I'm done with you, Aaron.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me over.
Of course.
As I mentioned earlier, Porches are going to be touring extensively in 2018, and you can stay in the loop as to their upcoming dates over at porchesmusic.com. And coming up next on the LSQ podcast, episode 5, it's an excerpt from a 2008 phone interview I did for Rolling Stone with Hayley Williams of Paramore back when she was barely out of her teens and her band was exploding into mainstream success based on their sophomore album Riot, which had produced a couple of huge singles, and the band at that point was about to go to the Grammys nominated for Best New Artist. And I was intrigued as I was putting together this episode and listening to the new interviews with Jonathan Wilson and Aaron Maine, that this interview with Hayley found her revealing that she, too, was brought up in a musical family. And again, I think that kind of thing really is just a huge buoy to a young, developing artist. Anyway, let's listen to a little bit of Hayley Williams from Paramore right now on LSQ.
Yeah, my grandfather listened to a lot of Motown and old school, like, just R&B and stuff like that, so, and a lot of Elvis, for sure. So I grew up listening to that, and then with my dad, I would listen to, Journey or Kansas and stuff like that. And I don't know, I feel like I had a pretty wide variety of music at a young age.
Are your parents or grandparents musical at all? I mean, does anybody play an instrument?
Yeah, my dad, he was in the school band. He mostly played trumpet, but he sang a lot. And my granddad played the drums, and fan of. So I think I get most of that from my dad and my granddad.
Do you think that Southerners are more, like, naturally musically inclined?
I don't know. There is something to be said for, like, the soul that there is in the South, you know what I'm saying? I feel like it was natural for me to be drawn to soul music, and I loved it, you know, at a really young age. I'm glad that my granddad started me on the good stuff, you know, really young, like listening to mostly the Temptations, but you know, anything like that.
Yeah, it's always funny, like, you know, every year when they have you know, American Idol auditions and stuff, it's always like, you know, more talented people from the South, and I wonder, you know, part of it has to do with just more people singing in church down there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It sounds.
Did you sing in church though, growing up?
Yeah, well, I did a little bit. I actually played. This is really funny, and I don't know if I've told anyone this, except for the guys. But I played drums in my church's band when I was like 10. I mean, obviously, I wasn't like, you know, Sheila E. or anything. Like, you know, I just kept the beat for them, and it was really fun for me, and I got super nervous. But I did sing in like children's choir, but I kind of got, I don't know, it wasn't really my thing. I mostly just like to sing and play around with my friends at home and in the car with my mom.
And then, like, when did you start sort of coming out of that and listening to punk rock?
Well, once I left Meridian, well, before I moved away from Meridian, I just kind of started, I guess, getting bored with what was on the radio, and I don't know, I guess I didn't really think there was anything else out there, and it wasn't really that I was rejecting any other type of music. It's just that I had no idea the possibility and the worlds of music that were out there that I had yet to discover. When I moved to Tennessee, I met Zach and Josh, and you know, they were, I had never met anyone like them before. They were just as passionate about music as I was. You know, only they already had a band, and they were like 11 and 14 years old.
Wow.
I was just like, this is what, because I always wanted to be in a band. Like, I would try to start bands at school all the time, but no one played any instruments but me. So,
meaning in Meridian, no one did.
Yeah, and even though I listened to what was on the radio, I wanted to be in a band, and because I just felt like it would be so much fun to make music with my friends. And
yeah,
when I met Zach and Josh, I was like, this is it, dude. And they started making me, you know, mix CDs and show me. We'd go to shows, and I just became so obsessed with this new world of music, and you know, just music that wasn't mainstream and stuff that I'd never heard before.
All right, well, that is about it for episode 5 of LSQ. Thank you so much for listening. Major thanks to Jonathan Wilson and Aaron Maine for taking the time to talk with me. I'm now sharing episodes every 3 weeks, and the next one will feature an interview with the awesome Angel Olsen. And if you've been enjoying the show, maybe leave a rating or a review. Make sure to subscribe as well. And remember, you can always reach me with questions or comments on Twitter @JennyLSQ. I'll talk to you next time.